The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. It's currently about 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to give folks another minute or two to log in, but wait, let me go through a few house items first. This session will last about 40 minutes or so. We will be recording this session today, and we will send you an email with a copy of the webinar slides after the session is done. Your telephone lines will be muted, so if you have any questions during the session, please use the chat box in the control panel to send them over. We will try to answer as many questions as possible in today's session, and if we run out of time, we will follow up with you via email. Also, please do not be shy about asking questions. The more you ask, the more you will get out of this session. And with that being said, we will start recording the session now. Okay. For those who have just joined, again, hello and thank you for joining today's webinar. My name is Diana Ospina, and I'll be your host for today. The topic is SAP S/4HANA Roadmap Update, and it's presented by Carl Dubler. Carl is the Senior Director of Product Marketing for HANA. And without any further ado, I will now pass this over to Carl to begin the webinar.
All right, thank you, Diana. And let me just start sharing my screen here, and hopefully you will see it. Maybe you can let me know if it's showing up there.
I see it.
Okay, very good. All right, thanks again, everyone, for joining me. Again, my name is Carl Dubler. I actually live and work in the Denver, Colorado area. I've been with SAP for 11 years, and I'm very pleased to be here to talk to you about my favorite product at SAP, which is called S/4HANA, the next generation of our ERP products, that have been in the market for many decades. If you have questions, you can ask those questions today if you'd like, or if we run out of time to answer questions or something just occurs to you later on, you're welcome to contact me directly. My email address is pretty easy. You can see my name there, Carl Dubler. Just send it to carl.dubler@sap.com. It's also at the end of this presentation in the PDF that you'll get. My email address is there. You're also welcome to look me up on LinkedIn, where I do a lot of posting and other things related to S/4HANA. Today, we have two parts to this webinar, and it's going to go by pretty quickly. I want to just show you what's in S/4HANA now and how do you find out about what's coming in the future. And the second part is, how do you get started? If you're interested in S/4HANA, how do you begin planning, and what is it that you need to know regarding some of the major choices that you have with S/4HANA? So two parts to this webinar. What I'll probably do is, after part one, just take a quick look at the chat and questions window to see if there's anything there we can answer. And then again, we'll do that at the end. So let's get moving on this. I like to remind people that S/4HANA has actually been out now since 2015, and of course it's based on SAP's ERP product and business suite that has been out for a long time. Many of you on the call are probably using SAP ECC6 in some form, which has been around since the year 2006. And this, you can think of this as kind of the next generation of our ERP product, and we'll talk about what makes it different. But whenever you talk about a new product, I've learned over my many years in the IT business that people are waiting. They wait, and there's several reasons why they might wait. They might wait because they're looking for the product to be more mature. For example, you've heard many times we only start with the third version of something. And S/4HANA is now in its fourth major release, if you include the original release in 2015. And we've had three major updates, and our cloud product is actually updated every quarter. So it has a lot of, it's got a very mature roadmap and feature set. And so if you're the type that likes to wait for the third version, well, we've got that and a little bit more. Others like to wait to see how it goes for other people before they look at something that's new. And this comes as a surprise to many people for a product that is as big as S/4HANA, that has been out since 2015, so only about 3 years. We actually have 8,000 customers who have bought S/4HANA. There are 3,200 projects going on right now in deploying S/4HANA, and a little over 1,500, it's actually close to 1,540 right now, are actually live on it, which I think is really good for something that can be as complicated as ERP, that we have that many customers in so quick a time period. In fact, it's our fastest growing product that SAP's ever had. And then of course, another reason to wait would be, well, we don't know what it means for us. And I want to be sure later on to show you that you actually have 3 tools that you can use today to help you understand how S/4HANA would benefit your organization and the steps you would take to actually begin planning for it. So we'll go over some of these things today, but I have a quick formula here to describe why S/4HANA is different than our previous ERP products. It starts with a simpler data model. We add to that a better and improved user experience, and those 2 things combined will give us some new capability and improved productivity. Add to that, you can deploy it anywhere you want. It can be deployed on premise, like you might be running SAP today. It can be deployed in the cloud in a number of different ways. I'll talk about some of those things. And really, you're going to see some common themes. Especially, you're going to see the theme of simplification, taking many different things and reducing it down to one thing that's easier to run and provides better productivity. So these are the key things. The simpler data model is really the most important thing that sets S/4HANA apart from our previous products. And what I mean by simplify is that it's not only faster, but there's fewer components. And if you think about the way you used photography, some of us who remember using actual film and darkrooms and paper and sending things via the FedEx or the Postal Service, you remember that you could actually speed each of these things up. You could actually do overnight delivery or 1-hour photo processing, but that is just being incrementally faster isn't good enough. We also wanted to make it simpler. And so you see today, of course, the architecture for photography is much, much simpler. And so faster is good. We want to be faster, yes, but we also want to simplify the data model because it allows us to do more things. So let me give you an example. You don't need to worry about all these acronyms. And if you're an SAP user, you probably recognize some of these acronyms, but this is just one example. So this is not the entire product, but this is just the inventory management portion of S/4HANA. On the left, you have how we used to run traditionally inventory management on, say, ECC6 running on Oracle or some other database. We needed about 26 tables to pull it off. With S/4HANA, okay, the HANA part is the database that we run on. It is an in-memory columnar database, so different than what we have at say Oracle or IBM or Microsoft. And with the in-memory speed and the way that HANA is designed, we can actually reduce the number of tables we need down to 1. So that's what I mean by a simpler data model. It's not just that we're running things faster in memory, but we are running them in memory, but it's not just the speed, but it's also the simplification that you can get. And this is going to result in some very interesting value propositions for you. So let's take a look at how that might work out. Oh, and by the way, in addition to simplifying the data model, as I mentioned, the user experience is much different than what you might be used to with your existing SAP systems. This is actually a slide that's about 1.5 years old. There's actually been a ton of work done to the interface. And yesterday I actually saw some screens of people making decisions and actually like approving things on an Apple Watch. So the amount of interface, the different experiences you can get also greatly improving. So how do you apply these things? And by the way, a lot of these slides you might see go by pretty quickly, but remember that you can get a PDF of these. And I put a lot of information in here knowing that I can't read everything to you in 40 minutes, but that you'll want to go back and look at some of these links later. But the 1709 version of S/4HANA on premise The cloud version, again, is updated every quarter. The on-premise version of S/4HANA is updated once a year, and so in a major update once a year. And that last major update was in the year 2017 and in the 9th month, which is September. And so there you get the 1709. So you can tell that that was the September 2017 update. And you can see some of the work there that we did with overview pages where you can combine lots of different types of transactions and analytics on the same page. So that's another example of how we're improving that user experience. So one way to look at this, okay, how do you apply? How do you take a simpler data model with a better user experience? What does that really mean for a user? Well, let's take a look at a process that every business has to do, which is close the books. And back in the old days, with say ECC 6 running on any database, Oracle, SQL Server, DB2, with the traditional databases, things had to be done in batches, and that's because of the complicated data model, an example of which you saw a couple slides ago. Lots and lots of tables, lots of things to consolidate, lots of things to reconcile. Of course, you had the FICO reconciliation, right? You had finance and controlling, you had intercompany reconciliation, and it was usually done in a frustrating way with batches and batches of spreadsheets. And this is why you never bothered the people in finance at the end of a quarter, because they were getting very frustrated trying to do this and get it done on time and track down all the errors. And so it all had to wait until the end of a fiscal period. You had to run all this batch work, as you see on the left, to try to consolidate everything. Now, when we move to our new data model, so the data model for finance is actually called Universal Journal. It's one object that contains everything in it. Rather than say 30 or 40 tables, you have one. This is what you can do with a better database, in this case HANA. And that allows you then, because of that simpler data model, I no longer need to do reconciliation because there's nothing to reconcile. I don't have 40 different tables I'm trying to tie together. There's one. Everything I need is there. So I can actually do a soft close anytime I'd like. By that meaning, I can actually simulate the close, run it and see what would happen, track down the errors, and at the end of the fiscal period, then closing is not anywhere nearly as difficult to do because, again, I don't have to do everything in batches. It happens basically in real time. So that's one example of what you can do with a simpler data model. Another example goes back to the inventory situation I showed you earlier. What if I could take 26 inventory tables and reduce them to one? Well, so imagine then a PGI process. So this is a situation where you've loaded a bunch of inventory onto a truck and it's going to be shipped out to your customers. So before you can let that truck go, you need to account for the stock that was put on the truck. Now, this has been a notorious problem in older versions of ERP, including SAP's older version of ECC 6, because there were so many tables that had to be updated that the system would lock the tables, and you'd end up with a lot of database locking. And what this would mean is that the PGI process would have to wait, which means that those trucks are having to wait. And in a busy warehouse, that's a problem. So what were people doing? Well, they were doing workarounds, which you don't want. They were doing their own, maybe they were doing their own spreadsheets that they would use to track PGI and then update the ERP system later. Or maybe they were doing things like taking a pizza to the database administrators in the basement and bribing them with it to maybe mess around with the locking system in the database so that PGI could run faster. That's also not a very good way of handling this. So with S/4HANA, because we're running on a simpler data model, well, there's one table. We don't have to lock tables anymore because there's only one of them. And so the updates are done so much faster with so much less impact that PGI now can run basically as fast as you need it without having all of these locking issues that slowed it down in the past. Here's another example of what happens when you get a simpler data model. Take finance, for example, and finance data and how it impacts IT. You can see here this example that I'm showing that goes from 593 gigabytes down to 8.4. That's a real example from a customer, one of the first to implement finance. So it's actually an old example by software standards that came from late 2015. So because we've gotten rid of all that redundant data that we needed to do reports and operational reporting on, we can now go from that 593 using compression, using the other things that HANA does, down to 42.4. And then this particular customer used a very smart system of doing of archiving and bringing some of that data out of the in-memory store and into a different storage system in case they wanted to use it later, but they figured, why are we keeping 15 to 20 years of financial data in our system when we rarely use it? So we want that to be available on a regular disk system, but not in the in-memory store. So you can actually begin to use these strategies to drop the amount of data that you're using. This has all kinds of benefits for IT, from backing up and recovery, to restarting after a failover, and it's just more reliable because I'm not dealing with hundreds of tables, I'm only dealing with dozens. So these are the things when we say we're running on HANA, we're running on this new database called HANA, we're not running on Oracle anymore, we're not running on DB2 anymore, we're not running on Microsoft SQL Server anymore. The reason we made such a big, bold decision like that is for what I'm showing you today, so that we could simplify the data model. We simply couldn't do this on Oracle, on their database. Here's another example that impacts IT. So this is a very simplified architecture, if you will, of an ERP system. Obviously, it's not anywhere near as complicated as what you do today, but it's the theory here that I want to show you. If we were to replace a legacy database with HANA, what can we do? Well, one of the things that you'll see because of the simpler data model is we begin to take applications that used to require their own hardware installed separately, and we're beginning to move those back down into the core ERP. An example of that is warehouse management. If you run warehouse management or extended warehouse management, EWM, you had to have a separate system for that. So not only were you paying the IT price for having a separate system, servers and all of that, but now you also had to do the integration work. Okay, now you run warehouse management as part of the core ERP. Again, we can do that because of the simpler data model. Now, if you want to run warehouse management on a separate system for some other reason, and there are legitimate reasons for doing that, for example, like your warehouse is actually in a very remote area and the internet connectivity is not very good there, you might want your own system out at that remote area. So you can still do that if you want to, but you can also begin to consolidate if you want to as well, again, to simplify IT and to reduce costs. And then there's a lot of different applications now that we can run in the cloud, especially in sourcing and procurement, CRM, service modules. Those things can also be put in the cloud, and that leaves you then with a much simpler landscape that you have to manage in IT. So that's the advantage of all of this running on a simpler data model. Now, one of the things I mentioned in part one, we want to talk about what's in S/4HANA and then what's going to come in the future. And these are links here that, again, you can pick up in the PDF version of the slides that you'll be sent by email. But there are two sites that I just want to mention to you here. I don't have time to demonstrate them to you, but there's two sites that I really recommend looking at if you want to get a very detailed look. So if you want to say, you know what, we run EWM and we run APO and we run all these other modules, what are the new features for those in S/4HANA? You can find out that information in these tools, but I do have some slides here that we're just going to rip through real quickly so you can get a feel of what happened in the last major release of S/4HANA, which was back in September, so a while ago now. And keep in mind, if you run in the cloud, we do updates every quarter. So the on-premise folks, they get a major update every year. The cloud customers for S/4HANA, they get something every quarter. And again, you can use these roadmap tools to find out for both cloud and on-premise what's happening. But I want to mention just some of the key things that we did in the last major release. You can see here the things that are in a kind of a black background icon there are new capabilities, and then things in orange are changes that we made kind of to existing, so some incremental improvements. So the main storylines were at the top there. Transportation management gets reintegrated back to the core. That's a very important thing, so you don't have to have a separate transportation management system running on a separate system anymore. You can run that from the core ERP. That was a big thing. Advanced variant configuration and demand-driven manufacturing. Were also big additions to the latest update. In fact, the DDM, the Demand-Driven Manufacturing Association, the industry group that runs that, we're the only product there, one of the only products that are certified for demand-driven manufacturing. Advanced variant configuration is the ability to get to that sought after lot size of one, so you could have a customer who orders a custom product from you. How do you manage your supply chain when your customers are making their own customizations to your products? Advanced variant configuration is the answer to that. There's also been some changes in finance. We began to add some of the machine learning capabilities that we have. We applied that to cash applications. The cloud version actually has even more of those that have come out. These are basically applications using machine learning to help your users make the right decisions, catch mistakes faster, things like that, identify fraud. There's all kinds of applications that we're using now with machine learning and artificial intelligence that are being added into the S/4HANA product. And again, we can do this because, and the reason, if you're going to want to take advantage of some of those future innovations that, well, they're not future, they're actually here now, but if you want to start taking advantage of those kinds of things, you need S/4HANA to do it, because we need that simpler data model. All of this is based on being able to simplify that data model. So keep that in mind for some of these things. So these were the things that were changed in the 1709 update. And then what I have in the next few slides, and you can see these are full of text. I don't want to read these to you, but what I did is I created a slide that, if you go back to these icons here, basically took the key changes that we made, the new features, and I basically list them out for you here, so you can read them on your own time, and you can learn what these mean for you. So here's a page on transportation management, for example, on variant configuration, catch weight management, which is very important in the food processing business. So there's a discussion on each of these new features. I also want to mention, for those of you who are in IT, that now we do support some key things that we needed in the IT side of things, with reliability and recovery, system recovery, and disaster recovery in particular. We've always been able to have two database servers sitting there. One of them is, you can see on the picture, a primary server, and one of them is a secondary server. And you wanted that in case your primary server failed, you would have another server to take over, and they'd be synchronized with each other so that you wouldn't lose anything when that happened. But before the 1709 update, before we started using this capability, that secondary server just sat there doing nothing, just waiting for disaster. And that's kind of an inefficient use of resources. So now another change that we've made is we've allowed that other server to be used for, say, reporting or other read-only capabilities, so that you can actually improve some of the speed of those processes by taking advantage of that backup server that you have there. And then if you really want to go crazy, you can even scale out a workload across multiple different database servers. And this would be if you are running a truly enormous amount of data. Think, for example, a utility company like an electricity or gas company that has millions and millions of customers, and they are dealing with the various financial aspects of managing those accounts, and they want to improve the speed, and maybe they want to do that because they are improving their customer service capability. When you call for help or you go on their website, it can look up your account history and have it all right there, and you need to have a very fast system for that. And when you have billions and trillions of records, you might want to scale that out across multiple databases, and that's something that we can also do now. So really what this means for you, if you're in IT, is that S/4HANA, working on that HANA database, is really now at a parity level with the other major databases in the industry that compete with it. And there's really very few things left to say, yeah, we need to wait. I mean, these are all things that we've addressed, very mature on that database part for IT. And we have also in the 1709 release, we also have a new Migration Cockpit. So if you want to actually bring in data from a non-SAP system in addition to your SAP system, we now have a new tool that helps with that, and it does a lot of pre-configured mapping to make that migration process go by even faster. So let's go ahead and jump into part two. There's just a couple things I want to show you here. If this is sounding intriguing to you and you're like, yeah, we need to look at some of these capabilities. S/4HANA is more than just another maintenance release. It's actually providing new capabilities that our business could take advantage of. Then what are the steps that we should take to begin to plan for that? And how do we know what it takes and what kinds of decisions we need to make? And really, if you are looking at planning to go to S/4HANA, there's really just 4 areas to consider, and I'm going to focus on that first one today because that's probably where most of you are, is at this point of I'm investigating and I want to see what it would mean for us to go to S/4HANA. You're maybe not at the point yet where you're like looking at specific deployment options, but you should be aware that there's different ways to get to S/4HANA. You can do different kinds of transitions, and that there's different destinations as well. You can stay on premise. If you're an on-premise customer, you can still do that. Or you can begin maybe to use this as an opportunity to look at the cloud options, of which we have many. We have a public cloud subscription-based offering that's very standardized, and so it drives the cost down. It's very easy to get users spun up if you need to grow or maybe start up a subsidiary on SAP. It's an outstanding option for that. But we can also do private cloud options too, including the ability to run S/4HANA on Amazon Web Services or Microsoft Azure. So if your IT department is thinking, yeah, Amazon's a strategic partner for us now, or Azure at Microsoft is a strategic partner for us now, you can actually run S/4HANA on those systems as well. So it's not just one destination, it's many, and the choice is yours. You get to make that choice based on your company's needs. We're not NetSuite coming in here telling you there's only one way to run the product, and that's in public cloud. You have the choice. But for the sake of time, I want to focus on that first box, which is the planning tools. And they're going to, again, on the PDF, you'll have the links to these, but there are 3 tools that you can actually get now. They're free, they're available today, that can help you figure out what S/4HANA means to you. And the first one I want to mention is the Business Value Advisor and the Business Scenario Recommendations. This tool here, what you do, you can either fill it out manually, but I recommend actually uploading some of your SAP usage data, which you can get from your IT department. You can actually upload how you use SAP today, and it will come back and tell you, These are the business processes that will be improved if you run S/4HANA. So this should be your first step, right? Because why bother if it's not going to do anything for you, right? I mean, if S/4HANA is not going to provide any business value to you, then your journey ends, right? So I would suggest using the business scenario recommendations because it will tell you exactly where S/4HANA can benefit your business. And then if you get off of step one, the next step would be to go to Transformation Navigator, where again, it takes your actual usage data, and then it comes back and it gives you a roadmap to say, hey, you're running warehouse management. Did you know that you could now make that part of your core? Or you're running transportation management. Do you know that that can now be simplified and reduced into the core ERP? So it gives you all of like the product options. Or maybe you say, you know what, I don't want to run our HR in the cloud yet, so we're not really ready for success factors. Then it will say, okay, then you can run HCM still locally, privately to yourself. You don't have to go to success factors today. So it'll give you all of those roadmap options that you need to know. And then finally, if you like what you see in step two, you can actually begin the IT investigation into looking at what it would mean to go to S/4HANA. Like, where are the problems going to be? Like, is there a piece of custom code that we have that might not be compatible anymore? And what do we do about that? Or is there a table that is just full of unused indexes or something like that we can reduce the size? Or is there a third-party add-on that might need to be updated to be compatible? All of those kinds of IT questions can be answered with readiness check. And again, what you do is you upload a file with your existing usage data, and it will tell you exactly what you need to plan for if you're in IT. So that's what we mean by personalized. It's not just a marketing tool. These actually use the data that your usage data in SAP systems today to give you this kind of advice that is really tailored to how you already use our software. So it's not like going to look at some PowerPoint from some marketing guy who's on a webinar with you. It's actually, tailored to what you're actually doing with SAP. So I'd really recommend, if anything looks interesting to you today, go get this slide that will be emailed to you. Go start with the business scenario recommendations and make your way from there. And if you run into an issue or a question you want to ask, again, you can reach out to me. The rest of this slideshow, I just want to show you what's in here, and I'm going to leave it to you to go take a look at it on your own. I've got a little description here about the different adoption paths. I mentioned already that we can run in cloud or on-premise, and there's a little bit more information here about how that works. If you would like to learn more, I have consolidated all of my favorite resources about S/4HANA at this nifty little URL, sap.com/s4next. And that way I'm not having to send you this huge list of URLs. You can find out what I think is interesting by going to that website. Here's my contact information. I'll put that back on the screen here in just a second. But I also want to let you know that there is, if you really love reading PowerPoint slides, I mean, really, really like it, I put a whole bunch of additional information that is based on industry and line of business. So if you want to take a look at what's new in sales, what's new in supply chain, what's new in my industry of oil and gas or utilities or whatever, I want you to know that's in there too if you are looking to just do some more slide reading. But I will end the slides here on this one with my contact information. And again, please do feel free to reach out if you would like to ask a question later, if something just didn't make sense right now, or you think of a question that you want to ask me later, then please go ahead and send me that. So Diana, I'm giving you my notice here that I'm turning off the my screen sharing so that you can take back over again.
Great, thank you so much, Carl. And I do see here we have two questions. The first one,
Sure.
Saeed. This question is, may we plan also for a Q2B order to cash cycle in S/4HANA?
Yes, and for your specifics, I would recommend that you look at those roadmap tools to get the details that I mentioned earlier. There was a couple roadmap tools about midway through that presentation that can give you details on order to cash. You can actually look up the specific process that you use and see what the equivalent is in S4 or how it has been modified or changed.
Great. And then our next question here is from Ariane Ruse. How can we get the PDF of the presentation? I will be sending that over to you after the session is ended. You will receive a copy of the webinar slides. We'll also send you a link to the webinar recording. And also, I welcome any other questions that anyone may have at this time. We have another one here. Do we have to use the Fiori interface with S/4HANA?
Okay, so that Fiori interface is the graphical interface I was showing earlier, and I even mentioned it's now spreading out to things like watches if you want to approve a purchase order or something from your watch for some reason. And the answer is in the cloud, if you use our public cloud version, yes, everything is done through Fiori. If you're using private cloud or you want to run on premise still, you actually can still use the old SAP GUI if you want. I guess that might be a helpful backup in case you deploy S/4HANA and you have a user or two who just does not like using a modern interface. They want to do things the way they did back in 2006, that's 70 software years ago or so, then that's fine. So no, it's not a requirement in every case, but much of the value that I'm showing you here comes from two things, the data model and the user experience. So keep that in mind, but it is not absolutely a requirement.
Okay, thank you. Now we have a question here from Esther, who has raised her hand. Esther, I'm going to unmute you so you can ask your question, please.
I would like to know if you have more implementation on cloud version or on-premise today.
Thanks, Esther. Good question. Most customers are running today the on-premise code line. And that doesn't mean that it's necessarily on-premise though. And let me explain. So if a customer said, we want to run on Amazon, they would actually be using our on-premise code line to run on Amazon. And we would call that a private cloud. Now, the customer might say they're running in the cloud, but we kind of look at it a little bit differently. The public cloud version is where, SAP is completely in control of that. So we handle the updates, we handle the maintenance, we handle everything. You just subscribe to the public cloud version. So most customers today are either on-premise or in a private cloud, and the public cloud is the version that is growing. It continues, like I mentioned, it gets an update every quarter, and we continue to see more and more customers using it. But for the most part, especially if you're already on SAP, most of those customers are either in the private cloud in some way, whether that's on Amazon or Azure or in a hosted data center, or they're running the on-premise version. But I'm sorry, I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head though. I couldn't tell you like what percentage it is, but that's the trend that we're seeing.
Okay, great. And we have another question here from Shoaib Ahmad. Is there any plan by SAP to bring SAP B1 on SAP S/4HANA?
To run B1 on HANA, I think, and no, I don't know of the roadmap. I don't work with the B1 team. I know who they are, but I don't really do a lot of work with B1 or BID. But so the answer is I don't really know if they're going to move that to HANA or not in B1. But I'd encourage you, if you want to remind me of this question by just sending it to my email address, I can find the answer to that roadmap question for you from the B1 team.
Okay. And that wraps up our questions for now. It's all the time we have. As Carl mentioned, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out directly to him. You will receive a copy of the webinar slides later today or tomorrow. Just give us a few minutes to gather this together and send it out. And again, we thank you all for joining us today. Carl, thank you very much for your time and your presentation. And have a nice day, everyone. Thank you.
Yep, thank you, everyone.